So I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we view the economies and how we view markets. A lot of the times we hear a lot about what is going on with the economies. Sometimes we hear the economy is in a terrible shape, then the next month we hear that the economy is doing great. So we thought that it'll be nice to take a step back and to see like where we are in the overall scheme of things. At Altfest, we take a long-term view, not usually 200 years, but we thought it'll be still nice to look at like what happened over the course of a very long term. And we looked at like from year 1000 till 2010, and you can see that what happened to global GDP per capita, that is income per person. And you see that there is a pretty nice pattern that was going on from 1000 to 1800. And that totally got disrupted from 1800 onwards. So what happened during that time from 1800 onwards? So it seems to us like if you look at the innovations, it seems like certain innovations were fueling this growth. We had printing press, so that was kind of propagating knowledge. That was the start of it. And in 1700, late 1700s, we had steam engine. So certain kind of inventions like that, and in the 1990s, we had World Wide Web. Innovations like that fueled the economic growth. So the question is like, we look at the world population. So if you look at the purple line, that's the world population, and the blue line is, again, income per person. And you see that there is an exponential growth in both since that time when the steam engine was invented. So what happened is that, like, if you look at the progress, the wealth creation, did not actually come at the expense of lower population, which was actually a popular theory in the late 1700s, where it's known as Malthusian theory. They said that whenever world population goes beyond a limit, it'll be automatically controlled because the world has limited resources. But we don't see that in data. So it's not only wealth, it's actually the prosperity. The human wealth and the prosperity actually kind of came together. If you look at like extreme poverty, 94% people were living in extreme poverty in 1800. Now it's 10%. Freedom of choice, democracy. 1% people are living in democracy. Now it's 56% of the people on earth who are enjoying democracy. Basic education, 17% had basic education. Now it's about 86%. Vaccination, nobody had vaccination because vaccine was not invented back then. So now you see that pretty much the whole population, about 90%, 86% has vaccination. Literacy, 12% people were able to read, now it's about 85%. Child mortality, 43% of the children died before they were 5 years old. Now it's about 4%. And I think one of the reasons was really vaccination. So again, going back to evolution of how this development is happening over time, we actually looked at like how this is happening in different parts of the world. It's not happening very homogeneously and synchronously. It's the growth that we are seeing. It has been somewhat asynchronous. So if you look at the steam engine invention, it actually happened in the Western economies. So Western economies actually grew much faster in the since late 1700. And what we see is that Western Europe and Western offshoots like United States, Canada, Australia, those were the geographies that really participated in the phenomenal growth in the initial period. So we asked a question ourselves, like what happened? Like what really happened during this time, during this period, that we have seen this kind of prosperity? What really fueled it? So two factors that stood out. One is urbanization, and another is trade. Urbanization, if you look at it, you'll see that since late 1700, the urbanization really picked up. So what happened in an urban economy? You have actually better human capital, you have expertise. And what we see is that the aggregation of knowledge and the assimilation of knowledge that happens at a much faster pace and at a much lower cost in an urban economy. And Atlantic voyages, this is about trade. We hear a lot about trade, like is the China-US trade war going to get the world to a halt? Like, is it really the end of it? But you see, like, it actually picked up since 1700, and those voyages, like, if you look at the history of certain voyages like this, these were actually, some were financed by investors like you. Like, a lot of these voyages, even though there were sponsored by primarily monarchies, but even in those days, they were actually financed by a lot of regular investors. Is that a reflection of what will happen in future? And how do we view, like how is the world going to evolve? So we looked at one of the OECD paper that projects like, that it has certain assumptions, and it looked at like the world economy is growing at a certain pace, and it kind of looks at like, okay, things will slow down because that kind of pace will have bumps. So what will happen is like, kind of made some modest estimates. And 2011, you see that small pie, and the next one is 2030, and the big one is 2060. So we kind of calculated it at a modest 3.2% or so growth rate for the world economy. And what we find is that it's a very interesting pattern. From now to 2030, the world economy will almost become twice, 1.9 times. From there to 2060, the economy will almost become 2.5 times or so. So it's actually, we are in a very interesting part of human evolution. And when crazy things happen in the markets or in the economies, we usually take a step back. We see, like, is this the end of it? And like, what is the overall pattern? I mean, on a day-to-day basis, we are not looking at 200 or 500-year statistics. It's usually 2, 5, 10 years projections. So, and of course, a near-term projection. But we try to look at, like, overall, when we see euphoria or panic in the market, we try to take a step back. And as investors, I think that's what we need to do, take a step back and look at what is the grand scheme of thing here. Thank you.